as I'll ever be. Good afternoon. Going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. Declare a quorum of 6 trustees present, soon to be 7, potentially be 7. Take us to item C, public comments. Ms. Horn, do we have any? We do not. Okay, it's going to take us to our workshop session. D1, debrief wow, we were just doing this up here. Debrief TASB convention. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent and board members. This agenda item is simply to allow us as a group to share any information we got from the TASB convention we attended at the end of last month. So just an opportunity for you to share out as you so choose. I am going to start, though, with passing along my thanks and job well done to Ms. Stormy Hickman and Ms. Molly Perry, both of which presented on teacher incentive allotment at TASB. And following that, I've had several superintendents from throughout the state reach out to me and ask for additional information. So like a good superintendent, I went and got that from the people and brought it back to the other superintendent. But no, thank you to both of them. They did a wonderful job on presenting that session for us.
As long as they're not requesting resumes.
Those I did not deliver.
All right, there we
Yes.
go. Anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I thought you might.
Sorry. I love the sharing of this because I love the conference so much, and it's I just think it's so much to learn, but it's also kind of it is inspiring, and it was also good to spend time with the rest of the board up there. I'm not going to tell you about every session I went to, but I did pick 4. Martindale already covered the TIA, which was awesome. One I went to was called Not by Chance, by Design, and it was by Northside ISD, and they did a really great presentation. And when they say by design, it was talking about their strategic design framework, right? And so it really aligned a lot with what we did, and it actually, it made me feel good and positive about what we've done with our strategic framework. They were farther along down the road, where they had been, they've been working towards some more actions that they've been put into place. They've been doing this for a while. And one of the things they focused on, which we see in ours, I think, as well, was this whole child commitment, right? It's more than just the academics. And that's what they call it. They call it whole child commitment, which I kind of liked. And they actually ended up with changing some names of some of their departments, and to one of their departments to student advocacy. And I think one of the examples that stuck with me is like, if a student's going to be truant, we're not out there trying to punish them. First, we're trying to advocate for them and try to get them to come back. And I know we do those things, but they really said how they felt changing the language made a difference too, and kind of just a perception. So that was a really impressive one. The second one I want to talk about, and I'm not really trying to be controversial, but it really was a very moving and powerful session. There was one at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, and there's only 4 to go to on 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, and it was addressing systemic racism, and that was from Richardson ISD, and they had their superintendent and a board member present. And they basically told their story of how they were working on equity in their district, and they have a very diverse district. They actually, they were one of the later ones to desegregate. They, until very recently, had to report to the federal government about their efforts to continue to have some equity. And they kind of progressed along a path of working towards focusing on equity in general, but then they got to the point where they said, we do find some racism in our district, and we're going to call it that. So they were very adamant about calling it that when they could find it. And I think one of the other interesting, and again, I'm not here saying that we have that, I think we don't, but just saying one of the neat things they did that helped them uncover some of the issues within their district in general was they had a theme for every year, and I think it was 2019 when their theme was say something. And it was a way, first kind of started out, say something good, right? Let's all post the great things. Let's, all about our district. But also make sure we're very open about being able to say things when they're not so good as well. And so they said they learned just a ton in general about their district from that. There were lots of people crying in there, and at the end, I think it's the only session where they got a standing ovation at the end. They just were good presenters too. It was interesting.
Ms. McAdam, excuse me, was that Garland or Richardson?
That was Richardson. Richardson, yeah, up there in Central Dallas, yeah. And again, it was a superintendent and a board member who presented that one together. And then the last thing I need to share is what we did in the delegate assembly, right? Because that's I was the rep for that. And need to kind of tell y'all what we did, right? Here's the giant book we get to be a delegate assembly, on the delegate assembly. We did that work, started at noon over lunch with our Region 6 members, right? So we meet with just our Region 6 delegates, have lunch and discuss the issues with them. And then we go into the giant room with the representatives from all across the state. And honestly, this year there were only 300 representatives out of the potential 1,000 districts. Wow. So I think it was fewer, maybe because of COVID, right? There was fewer than usual. But it's kind of a TASB, just a TASB general business meeting where they share all the things that TASB's done over the last year. They do obviously lots of things for us, from training to our teacher salary analysis and stuff. But then it really gets down to the members in there deciding what we as school board members and through TASB want to put together for our advocacy agenda. It's what we're saying is important for school districts in Texas. And so we go through, and I'll just point out the main three pieces, except for I can't read it. Cornerstone Principles, what are kind of the overall principles? Then what are the specific priorities for, this current time? And then what are some very specific resolutions? I think there were 25 resolutions that had to be voted on. We vote on all of them. We have resolutions to the resolutions, changing the language. It's very complex, but all that can be found on our TASB website under the legislative section, and really summarizing what is important for, again, school districts in the state of Texas. So thank you. You can ask me questions, but thanks. I wanted to really share what that process entails, because I know not everybody's been able to do it.
It's Robert's Rules in action.
It's what?
Robert's Rules in action.
They are very serious about Robert's Rules, and we actually had a couple of motions that didn't have the correct second, and they had to take and somebody called them on that. There was all kinds of interesting things going on.
I'm just going to report on one, pretty briefly. It was a session called Incubator Stations for Students, and there may have been more to it, but it was put on by Highland Park, and it was their MAP. It's their MAPS program, which was, of course, I didn't write down what exactly MAPS stands for, but I got super excited because it reminded me of what we are already doing here in our district. The stuff that they're working on over at College View. So, and the administrator that was involved with it, I really enjoyed listening to him as well, because he was very animated and very excited, much like our own Kevin Ross. I would love to see the two of them get together and just watch the sparks fly. But it was inspiring, to say the least. And I still need to send that email, but I would love to get some people connected in case we ever have questions, and see what they tried or whatever that didn't work, or what was highly successful. But it was really cool, and they involved the community just like we did with our strategic design stuff. But that's the only one that I loved. And I liked having time away out of town with all of you guys. So Thanks.
Well, as I mentioned, teacher incentive allotment, again, thank you to those ladies. They did a wonderful job. It kind of shows what I do gathering and going and listening to the sessions is it reinforces in my mind the work that we're doing in many instances. And it also kind of shows me that in some cases we're ahead of the vast majority in some of this work. And teacher incentive allotment was absolutely one of those. And again, I spoke to that earlier, and those ladies did a wonderful job presenting and representing our district. I attended one regarding healthcare, and we're going to have a little bit of information on that here shortly on an upcoming agenda item. But listened to a district that spoke about a self-funded healthcare and how they moved their way from TRS active care. And I also went to a session and the superintendent from Denton, along with some other folks, shared in relation to fast growth and long-range master facility planning, because they are absolutely exploding up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so just listening to kind of their process so that maybe we could tap into some of their wisdom as we think about the future and plan here in College Station. So those are the three biggies. I went to a couple of others, but those I think were the ones that struck me the most.
So since everybody's already talked about everything, so I also went to the healthcare one because I was on the healthcare committee, and I wanted to see how Raymondville ISD, I think they did it 4 years ago before all this got started. So it was kind of interesting to hear their pros and cons and just gather info as we were coming back here to visit, which obviously we'll hear about on item 2. Also went to the incentive allotment just because I was on that committee as well. And I just wanted to see what had developed from the end of our committee when we were on there to where we were now. And see how that was. That was phenomenal. A lot of good feedback. But the other one I did go to was Engaged to Learn, who helped us with strategic design. They put one on in regards to everything else that they do besides strategic design planning. And they paired up with Abilene ISD, who it was crazy to hear they lost 1,000 students because of COVID, as far as just not re-enrolling and whether they moved away or whatever. And to hear that and what they were going through, because they'd done their strategic design, they were doing, I think they were implementing some instructional coaching with their leadership teams and then their teachers, and then the teachers were getting certified and to be that, to teach and train, and just to hear kind of that domino effect, but then all this during COVID, kind of like what we did with strategic design, but just that next step. And I know we have instructional coaches on campuses and things like that, but it's just kind of interesting to hear that next level of what they can do besides what we went through with them, and get some good feedback of what Abilene was doing with that and how they were implementing it, because they have, and I'm probably going to butcher this, I think they have 6,000 to 8,000 students, and I could be totally off. Can't remember, maybe 12. The reason I say that is because I thought they were very
12. It's
somewhere in around there. So if y'all want to look it up, you can. But it was interesting just because I felt like they were kind of in the same dynamic as us, even though they have a lot more military influence up there as well. So that was pretty interesting. Overall, just the experience. It was my first time to actually attend the conference. I got to meet Mr. Martindale's mentor there at Holdsworth and visit with him without Mr. Martindale around, so that was awesome. And then just meet some different folks just around the districts, around the state of Texas, the Friendswood superintendent and his board president, and just kind of pick their brain and learn new stuff of what they're dealing with that we don't have to deal with, and how fortunate we are, and taking that to the bank on it, and understanding that it could be worse. We are in a good place. And it's nice to see that. And sometimes you need that when you get among your colleagues. So well worth the trip and looking forward to next year.
16,500
So I was close.
to be exact.
Because the next thing I was going to say was 6, 8, 12, 16.
Right. Multiples of 4. Yeah, you're good. And you spoke of Dr. Randall. Dr. Randall? He is a resident superintendent mentor as a part of the Holsworth program.
Let me just say something, because that was probably one of the coolest moments to visit with him. And he just had a school named after him in Lamar Consolidated ISD. But the coolest part of that whole story was he was honored to get a school named after him. I mean, come on, you've been doing this and you get your name on a school. But they also knew him so well that they put his mom's name on the cafeteria because of how good a cook she is, that they added that to it, and it surprised him. He had no idea. So when they introed him to the school and he went in, can't remember her name, but it was her name's cafeteria, and he just lost it. And to hear that, I was like, wow, man, you've put your place in history right there. So you can tell this guy's well respected through the state of Texas. So that was a neat little story he shared.
Well, the one that I enjoyed the most was having CTE programs being integrated with the district's facilities and maintenance department. And the way this district handled it was when they were building new buildings, any program that aligned with what they're doing, they would give, in their rubric of evaluating contractors, they would give extra points if they would allow the students in the program to apprentice during the building and construction. So that was interesting. It's a 2-for-1. The students get to work on the district's buildings, but as well as get apprenticeship time. I could see some issues. I mean, the questions that came up in the audience were liability. They said they did something similar to sports insurance for the students. There were a lot of things there, but I think it's something Kevin Ross and maybe Mr. Hall could look at for the future.
You remember the district off the top of your head? I'll go back and take a look.
I'll get it.
Thank you.
The ones that, especially the first day, there was a common theme of the ones that I went to, and they were all kind of, how different districts are dealing post-COVID with the issues that have popped up. And a lot of them were kind of works in progress, which was kind of neat to see. They're still kind of wrestling with this, as we all are, if there is such a thing as post-COVID. But the first one I went to, and the reason I asked, was it Garland or Richardson? Because there were 3 districts together, and it was Dallas, Garland, and Richardson together, administrators from those 3 districts, which are all vastly different than us. But like Mr. Horak, as I'm listening to them sharing about their experiences of the last year and a half or so, wow, am I glad I'm here. And we just don't know how good we've got it. And every time I go to something like this, I'm reminded that we only think we have problems. But it was a good presentation. They were all very well spoken and very sharp. But talking about how they're redesigning facilities and restructuring staff to deal with mainly what's going on with what was talked about last night at the forum a lot. And I see a couple of the candidates out there, and it was good to hear just about the mental side of the students, of the student population right now, what they're going through, and the social emotional issues, and that they are leaving no stone unturned in how they can help alleviate those issues. It was really good. And then the one we were kind of laughing about that you all will get to hear very soon was I went and sat through the legislative update. And I'm still kind of in a coma from it. There was a lot. So it was like a Stevie Wonder album. It was all killer, no filler. I mean, it was just constantly coming at you. A lot of information in 2 hours, but that there will be an update we all get to go through. Or I guess, Ms. Green, we don't have to. Enjoy it, guys. No, it was good. It was really good. It was a great weekend. Anything else? Except the game wasn't great that weekend. So but I digress. Let's go ahead. D2, receive an update on the work of the CSISD Employee Healthcare Committee. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Our Chief Administrative Officer, Molly Perry, is going to share information with us regarding Senate Bill 1444 that has to do with the opportunity for districts to opt out of TRS Active Care. So we put together an ad hoc committee several months ago. This group has met 3 total times. Ms. Perry and Dr. Dixon have led that group. So she's going to provide us an update on that work, and we're progressing from here.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale. Mr. Nugent, members of the board, happy to bring you all an update on this committee that we chartered last August and quickly began the work. And so hopefully this evening we'll have an opportunity to really go through a lot of the similar information that committee did so that you all can see where we are in that work and what our next steps will be. So as a reminder, the purpose of this committee was to really evaluate the new options that were presented as a result of Senate Bill 1444 that was passed in the most recent regular legislative session. Got to clarify that since we just finished all of the session yesterday, and make recommendations about the course of action for meeting our employees' health care benefits beginning as soon as 22-23, but really and beyond. So that committee really spent some time initially developing understanding of those existing and potential healthcare options because we needed to ultimately make that recommendation about the next steps regarding either staying in TRS for active care or seeking alternative options. And for clarity, that committee was not considering supplemental coverage. This was really outside of the scope, and that's not part of TRS Active Care. And they were also not charged with determining who that provider would be if we leave active care. So as I mentioned, we chartered that committee back in August and quickly got to work. On August 31st, we held our first meeting where we really just went through a lot of background information, both related to the district as well as TRS Active Care as a whole. On our second evening together, we heard from a consultant who we do have a relationship with, but it was really a non-biased presentation of just what are those options outside of TRS. As a district who's been a part of that system for a very long time, we really needed to develop some foundational understanding. And then we also looked at some upcoming changes to TRS, and then ultimately came back and discussed the feedback that committee members were able to gather in the interim and develop some consensus around our next steps. So I'm going to walk you through a few of the slides and the aspects that the committee had the opportunity to consider. The first of which was really just looking at what is that history of TRS Active Care. You know, for those of us that have not really experienced anything else, it was new learning. I think for some folks to know that, you know, this has not always been the case. Districts were self-funded before TRS was authorized to provide health care for those active employees. Previously, it was just retirees. And then statewide coverage really didn't even begin until 2001. So after that opened up, CSISD went through a similar process in the early 2000s to consider what would be the best option for our employees. And at that time, it absolutely was TRS Active Care. And we opted in. And under state law, once we opted in, we could not opt out. And so we have been in that system ever since. Now, in about 2015, there were a small handful of districts, at least initially, that recognized that perhaps they could use their District of Innovation plans, or DOI plans, to access what I'm going to call a loophole, where the districts did not opt out of TRS, but offered side-by-side coverage of either TRS Active Care for their employees or a self-funded plan. And so we were watching that actually very closely and had conversations around whether or not we might want to consider going ahead and revising our DOI plan before necessary and looking at whether it might not benefit our folks. But we also knew that there was a legislative session coming up and suspected they might close the loophole, which they did. So not only does 1444 provide us that option to opt out for those districts that were offering concurrent plans with active care and self-funded, they have to make a choice about TRS or not. And so they'll also need to make that decision about their next steps moving forward. And so that's where we are. In the present, we're looking to see what is that best option for our employees. So this is a timeline that TRS has published to provide a little more clarity around what those next steps would look like in the event that a district chooses to opt out of TRS Active Care. And so our initial deadline to make this decision would be December 31st, 2021. For the 22-23 plan year. Now, if we choose to stay in at this point, that doesn't mean that we have to stay in indefinitely or stay in for 5 years. We could hold another year, continue to evaluate our options, and then elect to opt out in future years. But our earliest decision point would be December 31st, should we decide that we are going to opt out. And so then you can see, once you do opt out, that is effective for 5 years. So if we leave, we can't go back until that 5-year period expires. So it is important for not only the committee, but you all as a board, of course, to understand how those specifics work in terms of our options in and out. So some of the other information that we talked about as a committee is just how many districts are in active care, and the vast majority are. You can see there 1,088, and that does include some charters, as well as non-participating, which is 125. So out of all the districts in Texas, only 125 are fully out of TRS for health insurance. So then you can see here as well on the right, some information about our provider history. We've been with Blue Cross Blue Shield as part of active care for the majority of the time. They did go out for bid, and Aetna won that bid for a period of about 6 years there, and then switched back to Blue Cross in 2020 to present. So another aspect of the committee's consideration really was looking at what options do we currently have within TRS Active Care. And those have evolved over the last few years, and certainly the rates have changed. So we do have in those plans very fixed options, and 4 are currently available, including Blue Cross Blue Shield or a Scott and White HMO. As a district, we contribute between $401 and $500 per month for the non-pooled plans. And it's important to also know that that minimum required contribution is $225. So we are significantly higher than what the state requires in terms of our healthcare contributions for employees. So then we looked at those changes that have happened specifically in this year. It was a particularly high increase. We've seen increases over the years for quite some time, but the 8% you see there was about average, with the exception of the Scott and White plan with the HMO. And TRS actually put a statement out about this, saying that those rate increases were due to the pandemic. Of course, we saw an increase in claims across the state related to COVID-19, but also they pointed to the fact that there were fewer participants in the active care program because of those districts that were offering the side-by-side plans. And so that is what they indicated was driving up the costs this year. So looking at our contributions, not only do we contribute more, but we, back in 15-16, implemented a tiered system so that we could help to defray the escalating costs. That's when we really started to see those rise. And so you can see there that difference between the 17-18 year and the 21-22 year. And we have historically been able to offer a zero-cost option. Unfortunately, we were not able to continue that. And so we do have an employee-only plan that is $16 at this time. So then shifting into the second meeting, we really spent the entirety of our time diving into the understanding of plans outside of TRS active care. And so those options really fall under reference-based pricing, self-funded, and level funded. And so the committee had the opportunity to really explore what are the strengths, what are perhaps the disadvantages of each of those plans. And so you can see here, reference-based pricing is very, very controlled. There's very little choice for the participants that are involved, but it does maximize savings and provide a lower cost to the recipients. Self-funded is essentially us being our own medical insurance company and handling those expenses, but then the level funded would really be kind of a hybrid where we would have also that stopgap insurance in the event of extremely high claims. In the meanwhile, had an opportunity actually at Tessa TASB to attend a session presented by TRS about the changes coming. Now, they were not able to provide specific details about what exactly this means, but we do know that they are moving towards regional-based rating. So rather than just looking at the entire state of Texas as the pool, that they would be looking most likely at regional service centers as the regions for these different ratings. They did say that they feel like this will help them remain competitive, but they also don't know at this point who through this process will stay and will go, and that will certainly impact things as well. So in the process of having the committee come together, we did request our data from TRS, and we're able to acquire that for the last 3 years. And our third-party administrator that we currently have a relationship with was able to assist us in evaluating that claims data. What we do know from looking at that information is that over that 3-year period, our premiums exceeded claims costs very consistently. And so what we know from that is if those trends hold true in the future, we could engage in either a partially or fully self-funded program, even with that addition of a stop-loss premium and other administrative fees. We know that a lot of our employees are part of the Baylor Scott & White HMO plan, and so we really specifically wanted to address that piece as well for the committee, and we know that it would not be an option as an HMO. However, in evaluating plan options, we could certainly include a plan that has Blue Cross Blue Shield as an in-network provider. So what are our next steps after all of that? Well, number one, we have got to really evaluate those options for choosing an alternative provider, including the selection of a consultant. We have been engaging districts from around the state that are fully or partially self-funded, as well as a few that have been offering side-by-side plans to determine who they utilize as their consultant, whether or not they are happy with their services and are moving towards interviews to help us in that process of consultant selection. Once we do that, we would then engage that consultant to help us to determine who is the best provider for our employees, because there are so many options and flexibilities in plans that are outside of TRS Active Care. So, of course, we would need a very specific timeline for this transition, because we absolutely could not risk having any gap in coverage for our employees, and would want this to be a very smooth process. And so we do plan to continue this work over the next few months. While the committee did say absolutely, we are very interested and feel that leaving active care is probably the best option for us. We have some more homework to do in that process of evaluation and really looking at that vendor selection process and timeline. So we do not anticipate bringing any recommendation to the board for action before that December meeting, because we want to make sure that we turn every stone possible before we are in a position that we are up against that timeline to need to make a decision. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Well, it's a lot, and obviously you guys are having to do a lot of work very quickly, so thank you, because it's obviously an extremely important decision as well. So again, you've said kind of in general you feel like the committee thinks there are some benefits to moving away. You showed kind of the 3 different paths, one being the self-funded. Have you made a focus on one of those 3 yet? Is self-funded the one we're
At this point, we're really focusing in on either self-funded or partially. And so in that process of engaging a consultant, we'll be diving in more deeply about what makes the most sense for us.
And I guess, and obviously there's lots of details, but trying to understand, obviously, the risk with the self-funded, and that, I think that's going to be important for us as a board to understand the financial risks if we are self-funded, and kind of what are the limitations on that. So is that something, we'll get to that level of detail before we would make a decision on that?
Absolutely. That analysis of risk was part of what we looked at, as a committee in terms of claims versus the amount that our employees are paying into the system. And we would want to make sure that, if we go that route, that we are financially in a place where it makes sense for us. And we're very fortunate to have a CFO who has worked within a school system that is in that realm of outside TRS. So.
Kimberly, the hybrid that Molly mentioned that provides some stopgap coverage is an opportunity or a way to mitigate or manage your risk if you're self-funded. It's I don't want to say a parachute, but it provides you some coverage if your claims are going to exceed your premiums.
Yeah.
And Molly, correct me if I'm wrong. When we looked at and what led the committee to kind of go ahead and begin to explore these options, the data as far as the premiums we paid as a district relative to our claims absolutely drove us this direction because our premiums, as Molly touched on, exceeded our claims in such a way that we felt as though if we pursued other opportunities, we might will allow us to maybe manage the premiums our employees are paying currently.
And I certainly appreciate that. I just have the little saying from the financial advisors in the back of my mind, though, that past performance does not always predict future performance, right? So, I mean, you hear the horror stories of a couple of key claims, right, that could cause problems. So again, just make sure that we will see kind of some of that risk analysis and the options when it gets towards us. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Perry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Molly.
All right, takes us to D3, receive an update on the work of the Academic Achievement and Class Rank Committee. Mr. Martindale.
Ready. Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Ms. Tiffany Parkerson, our Executive Director of Secondary Ed, has been leading the charge in this area. Really, that group, well, not really, they have met twice thus far this semester to really dig in and take a look at policy EIC local, in particular grade point distribution and how those are calculated relative to other school districts. So Tiffany is going to kind of give us an overview of the first two meetings and where the conversation is headed at this point in time. Ms. Parkerson?
All right, thank you, Mr. Martindale, Mr. Nugent, and the rest of the board. Excited to fill you in on the progress that we've made so far. We have only had 2 meetings, but they have been very full meetings with lots of robust conversation, to say the least. So the purpose of this committee is to examine our CSISD policy EIC and determine whether we would like to bring any recommendations forward for your consideration. And so, I had someone ask me recently, like, where are we headed with this committee? And so I would like to go on record with, this is where we're headed. We're really digging in and looking at all aspects of the policy to determine what is best for our students in light of the recent strategic design process that we've gone through as well. So the committee did begin work this last September. We've had those 2 meetings that I mentioned. If this committee does recommend any changes, remember that will be for a designated cohort of students that has not yet entered high school at this time. And therefore, no current high school students would be impacted. So we would not be changing the rules of the game, if you will, in the middle of someone's race to the finish line in high school. The committee is rather large. We have about 55 committee members, including a wide range of teachers from all content areas, as well as administrators from both campus level and central office administration, students from both our middle schools and our high schools, as well as parents and community members, and those that category, the community members especially, includes some former CSISD students who are recent graduates who are in college, as well as people who work at Blinn College and at Texas A&M. And so we have those resources to draw upon in the group as well. Through the course of our 6 scheduled meetings, we are going to review the policy very thoroughly. We are looking particularly at our current Tier 1 and Tier 2 course offerings and how the different content areas and the different sample transcripts, how that really shapes the students' stories as far as what their GPA ends up being and how that shapes their potential options when they are applying for college. And we are also looking in depth at 20 comparison school districts and their policies before we get to any conversation about whether or not we think any recommendations need to be made. In fact, at the first meeting, we got a little sidetracked and we had to come back to, we're not ready to make recommendations. We need to make sure that that is the direction that we want to head. And there's a lot more information out there that we need to gather before we move toward any conversation about any recommendations for change. So in our first meeting, the key question was, how well does this policy align with our CSISD strategic design framework? And so in order to answer that question, we first had to spend a lot of time, I'd say at least the first half, if not about 3/4 of the meeting, really digging in to the CSISD strategic design framework. And we looked at all aspects of it. We also needed to make sure that everyone had a common understanding of what the policy actually says. We have our institutional memory or the practice, our own personal experiences, but let's be realistic. How often does anyone actually sit down and read what the policy itself says? And so we needed to really get into the policy. And then at the end of the meeting, we evaluated the alignment with those strategies. And so I've gone through and pulled some pictures and some of the slides to share with you all from the first and the second meeting. Whenever we were looking at the strategic design framework, it was affirming to see the patterns that those who may even have been seeing it for the first time were able to identify rather quickly, and really latch on to that idea that we're striving to actualize each learner's unique success and what that piece of the vision means, and then how you see it in all the different layers in the portraits, the core beliefs and commitments, and then in the way we've crafted our goals as well. And so there were really powerful conversations going on there. And I have to admit that I strategically chose this picture because it showcases one of our middle school students, and students just make everything better, including GPA discussions. They are really insightful. It's been great. Just as a reminder, this policy does have multiple parts to it. The first section is on that consistent application for a graduating class. The second is the calculation and which courses should be included in the calculation. The third section is the weighted grading system, which includes both the tiered weighting of the courses as well as the conversion chart of what our numerical grades convert to in the weighted scale. And then the end of the policy is the local graduation honors section. We had pointed this out to the board previously, but when I get into some of the aha moments, it was a realization for many on the committee to notice that we do have 2 different policies or aspects of the policy for our comprehensive high schools versus College View High School as well. All right. So as I said previously, we're framing the entire conversation around the strategic design framework in all aspects of it. And so at the end of that first meeting, everyone had an opportunity to complete a survey based on their initial understanding of the strategic design outcomes and their initial understanding of our policy, how well they thought that was aligned. And I'm not showing you the charts and graphs yet because the committee hasn't seen it, but I will tell you that on the whole, everybody was kind of shooting to the middle. It was a range of 1 to not aligned at all to 5, and we had lots of 2s to 4s, okay? We also had an opportunity for each table to share out their questions and their realizations. And in looking at that feedback, the trends of that feedback really centered around these three things. First, many did not realize how complex the policy itself actually is. They also had a lot of questions and comments around the two tiers of weighting that are identified, the 4.0 and 5.0 courses, versus our perceptions of different courses as having more than just two levels of course offerings that we are giving to our students. They also many were surprised that dual credit was unweighted, that was something that many didn't realize was part of our policy as well. And there was a whole lot of that last. Why? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why do you think this, in that background? And so as we move forward, that's why we're taking so much time in the background to answer those whys and give that background knowledge and make sure everybody builds that common understanding. So I took this feedback and tried to use it to steer our second meeting, which was on October 4th. And so we answered two key questions in that meeting. First is, so how does this actual policy impact our current students? What does this really mean whenever we are using this policy in everyday life with our kids? And so we went through and calculated sample GPAs using our conversion scale for a wide variety of sample student transcripts. We had 5 different sample students with purposefully very different interests and very different pathways through their high school career. So we were able to really see how those course offerings impacted their GPA calculations. And then we also had the first half of an ongoing conversation where we're comparing our policy with other similar school districts. So their homework in preparation for the October 4th meeting was to take home the course catalog and choose at least one core subject area and one elective program of study or content area, and really take a look at which courses are designated as Tier 1 and Tier 2 courses so that they had that background. And I stress this to the committee that this committee has no influence on the course catalog. Okay, this committee is not going to set what courses we offer our students. But in order to really be educated as to how we use this policy, everybody needed to have a working background knowledge and understanding of the courses that we offer and where they fit. And so we had some great conversation around that piece as we realized in which programs, at what point you were able to have an advanced course offering for 5.0 versus what things are taken for no credit. And so it was just really rich conversation around how the course catalog or course offerings may have been shaped over time by the policy, but also how a student's selection of courses impacts their academic achievement through their GPA. The 20 comparison school districts that we have looked at are listed here. We chose, for a variety of reasons, these particular 20 school districts. So at this point, each committee member has had an opportunity to really closely examine one policy and compare it side by side with the CSISD policy. And we're at the point where we're having the beginnings of the conversations at the tables about the differences. And so each table would have had 4 to 5 different examples of this. And in our upcoming meeting next Monday, we'll really take a look at all 20 across the board and identify patterns and have an opportunity to identify the things that we think might benefit our students to consider that may be in some other policies as well. But I think this was the key revelation. This is a direct quote from the anonymous survey from one of the table talks. Wow. Okay. It is interesting to see all the differences in GPA calculations between the different school districts. They didn't realize, I'd said previously that it truly is a local policy. And after looking at all 20 of these, you can see those distinct differences in the choices that communities have made to serve their students through this policy as well. So this is just an example of the side-by-side comparison. In the first meeting, they had the opportunity to complete the left side about our policy, and then they completed the same note-taking guide, if you will, for their comparison district. So they have that in writing. So as we keep coming back to it, they have that to easily access. So we also had the table of reflections and feedback, and there were, once again, 3 key trends throughout. First, they had lots of ahas surrounding the role of course selection and student interest in different programs that we offer and how that manifests in someone's grade point average based on the way the policy works. There were also a lot of reflective questions about the purpose of GPA, like why? Why do we do this? Okay, once again, which ultimately leads into the third bullet so what does this mean for college admissions? Ultimately, we want to make sure our students are having, whatever opportunity they want, and the doors will open for them whenever they're applying for college or for that next opportunity. And so they really want to know more information about what that means in the application process. And this is just going back to that. We closed out meeting number 2 in the same way with that survey to go back to that frame of the strategic design process and that framework. And they answered the same questions again. And it was interesting after they had time to see actual transcripts and do the math. And bless us all, we actually did the math with the calculators and really lived that experience of analyzing a transcript, led by the English teacher. I apologize. And then we also closed it out here, and it was interesting to see how it shifted after seeing the 20 comparison policies, after living through that, more toward we're not really sure that our policy is aligned with that vision at this point. And so after this third meeting, I'm still not going to show on Monday. We'll close with the same question and then look at trends over time based on the information, and I'll share that in the 4th meeting with the committee. So that kind of gets us into what's up next. So we will really hone in on that second question that has come up about what does this mean for college admissions at the next meeting. We do have at least one guest speaker who is coming to speak to us with firsthand information about the college admissions process from both the lens of a large university system, but also how it may differ for a smaller college or a regional university and how they use GPAs and whatnot in the admissions process. And so that will be really useful background information. And then, of course, we will finish our debriefing process and really being able to look at all 20 of our comparison policies. And then close out the meeting as well with, so you've built a lot of background knowledge. Where do you think we need to head next in identifying which pieces of the policy we think we might need to entertain some potential revisions in? We could end meeting 3 with we're good to go. You never know. So that's the next step for the committee. And just to outline, we do have 4 meetings left, and we'll continue to update you through each step of the way before we would bring any potential action before the board. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I don't have a question, but just I'd be remiss as the person sitting in there. I think Mrs. Parkerson does an amazing job facilitating this, engaging us in this learning about, our policy and the other policies, and really also, again, going back and aligning that to our strategic design framework. I'd say each hour and a half meeting just flies by because we really are engaged. So nicely done.
Thank you.
I have one simple little question. And it's just to make sure I'm understanding, when it says unweighted, that means it's 4.0, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I can tell that a lot of work went into designing even just this so that everybody truly understands what they are doing and what they are looking at. I learned a lot just from this, so I can imagine, there's so much that I need to learn about this type of stuff. I can imagine the learning that's happening during y'all's meetings. But it's apparent that this was very well thought out to ensure that whatever that recommendation is to us, it truly is a reflection of what they've learned and what they decide needs to happen in the future. So great work so far. I'm excited to hear what they decide.
I just have one question on the districts that we're comparing against. Are you looking at when they adopted EIC local or changed EIC local? Like it hasn't been in the recent future and then, the time period, or has it been that way for 10 years or that type of thing? Is that part of the comparison?
So thank you for asking that, because there is a wide range in there. There are a few districts like us that have not touched the policy in many, many years. But we also have several that have changed within the last 2 to 3 years. And made significant changes. And so that's really interesting to see the choices that they made. And we happen to have some contacts in those districts
Yes,
that
that's what I was
we've been able to converse with. And so we'll share some background on the reasons why they made the changes that they did as well.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to understand their learnings. Like, what would they have done differently? What unanticipated impact that it may have had. So that's great. I love it. Thank you.
And the admissions officer who will speak with us on Monday also will be able to speak to the before and after for those districts and the students in the admission process. So I don't anticipate us getting into the nitty gritty of him naming which school districts, but being able to say that shifting this is the outcome
Could
of that.
impact that, right?
Yes.
That's huge. Thank you.
Yeah, because it'll be very interesting to see what the speaker has to say, because I'm interested in how we see how this is local policy and it's done numerous ways, depending on the district. The universities or wherever, the admissions department have to translate those things. Because a course in one district, maybe I saw something weighted a 9.0 in their particular, is that correct? There was a district that uses a 9-point system. So ultimately, through the admissions process, the universities and admissions departments have to translate all of those types of things. So what I'm most interested in is to learn how they do that, what factors into their decision making. Because what we want to make sure that we're not doing is unintentionally, through a local policy that we haven't reviewed in some time, is that we're creating unnecessary obstacles for our own students. So that is will be conversation for down the road. And I agree with Kimberly that Tiffany's done a wonderful job structuring these and leading these conversations. They're very intense. Leading the group through calculating a transcript was an interesting evening, but you did a wonderful job with an English teacher. But people experiencing that and understanding that and beginning to realize how that does influence kids' decision-making on the courses they take and those types of things. Excellent work. It's been some time coming, so thank you for your leadership in this area.
Thank you.
Yeah, it has been a hot topic for a few years, several years. So thank you so much for tackling it, and look forward to seeing where you guys end up.
Me too.
Just one more closing comment, Ms. Parkinson. So this would not impact any current high school student?
Yes, sir. It would not
Okay,
impact
thank you.
any current high school students.
Okay, just make sure I understood that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Parkinson. That's going to take us to D4, receive an overview report on the Texas COVID Learning Acceleration Supports Grant awarded to the district. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent and board members. You've heard us reference in past meetings several times T-class grant. Those are grant monies provided by the state really to provide supports for accelerated learning to make up for any academic loss that kiddos may have experienced during the pandemic. There are 10 different, they're called decision points in T-class, but 10 different areas of which districts can apply and receive funding for those particular endeavors. We have applied and received funding for 7 of those decision points in the T-class grant. And Dr. Trammell, our Chief Academic Officer, is going to give us an update as to those and those particular areas, specifics with those decision points.
Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Martindale indicated, we did receive 7 of the original 10 decision points that were offered to districts throughout the state, and those decision points are in blue. As we look at the first one, Decision 2, we received just a little bit over $2 million, and this was for high quality instructional materials. These materials can be used as part of our literacy block or for tutoring. They are considered high quality tutoring materials. In particular, we applied for Amplify K2. It is a resource that comes in English and Spanish. It focuses on your phonemic awareness and phonemes, and phonics. This is directly aligned to the Science of Teaching Reading, which all of our kindergarten through third grade teachers are currently taking right now. These funds will cover the Amplify K2 in English and Spanish, as well as any professional learning needed, as well as any print materials, physical materials, such as alphabet cards, manipulatives, the books, anything like that that would go along with the programs. And then it's important to note too, it covers funding for literacy coaches, and it would cover funding also for math coaches. Based on the ratios that the state indicated, we qualified for 6 of those positions, which will help us with our current staffing. As we move along, high quality materials that are supplemental, we received almost $3 million on Decision 3C, which is excellent. This is for a material called Learning Dynamics. And what this is very colorful, phonetically written books for elementary age students. There is a home kit, there is a teacher kit, and there is a student kit. In the teacher kit, there's like a manual with lessons and things that they can do with these materials. The student kit contains these 53 very colorful, phonetically written books. The at-home kit contains the exact same thing with parent training materials that kind of goes along with the teacher materials. So these materials could be used in the classroom. They could be used in a tutoring group. They make an excellent homeschool connection. And the books that go home with the students, the 53 books that are identical to the 53 books that could be in the classroom for the student, are identical. So you can imagine the great rapport and support going back and forth, because kids aren't taking books back and forth. They've got the exact books at home in a personal library that they have in their classroom. So we are very excited about this. And in particular, that the kids just get to keep the books. They're theirs to keep. The next decision we were awarded was also part of Decision 3, and this is the Texas College Bridge Program. Now, this is a program we've been participating in for going on a year and a half, but we haven't been reimbursed for any of it. We received around $109,000 for this program, and essentially what occurs in this program is students take a diagnostic assessment, and the program places them wherever they are. It's specifically for juniors and seniors. And instead of having to take a whole reading course to be college ready or a whole math course to be college ready, the diagnostic assessment places them where they are at. So they don't have to repeat a bunch of material that they already know. And they have a teacher that oversees their progress. And so they start from where they are and they complete the program. Their counselors and teachers help them in that process, and there are funds in this to pay for the course and to pay for the assistance with the teachers and counselors. The cool thing about this program is that it will help a student be career and college ready and military ready. And then it also helps us with our A through F accountability program. So it will certify these kids as CCMR and count on our accountability rating. The next decision that we were awarded was Decision 4A. We received $92,000 And this is similar to something we participated in a few years ago. It's been probably 2 or 3 years ago, called the Grow Your Own program. We received around $19,000 for 4 of our paraprofessionals who have at least 65 hours of college education to complete a college degree in teaching and get certified. So that's really exciting because we do have some paraprofessionals that meet that criteria, and this can help them finish their degree and actually become teachers in our district. The second layer of this, or tier, is we received funding in this to help 2 paraprofessionals who would like to go and just get their teaching certification. So it's kind of a 2-level program. We can help a total of 6 teachers, which was the maximum that the state allowed for this particular item. The next decision that we were awarded was Decision 5, and we are so excited about this decision. This would be a partnership with Texas A&M University, and this is for teacher residents. We received $1,250,000 for this particular decision point, and this includes a $20,000 stipend for each teacher resident. In collaboration with the Texas A&M Department of Education, we put in for 50 teacher residents, 10 this January, 20 this coming fall, and 20 the following fall, and received funds for all 50. And they would get the $20,000 stipend and be in our classrooms for a full year with their supervising teacher. We did the $250,000 is for flexible funding. That's to buy a laptop for the residents and pay a stipend for their supervising teacher and pay for their teaching certification at the end of their program. And then there's some work with the state. The state has not clearly defined this yet, but for innovative staffing design and implementation support. So we are so excited about this. I've met with A&M several times. Today, I received a list of 20, and then I received just a while ago 3 more from Jean Carter saying, there are so many people that want to be in College Station. Can you interview 3 more? So she has screened. We now have 23 kids that are interested in this residency program. We only have 10 spots for January, so we'll have to narrow that down. But we're starting the interview process at the end of this week, and we're excited to place these kids with some of our great teachers.
Penny, on this particular item, so we get to identify who we accept or who we partner as far as the
Yes.
residents. And so what this allows us to do is really begin cultivating teachers joining us full time, generating a candidate pool, so to speak, through the resident program for hard to fill areas, correct?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
we did prioritize hard to fill positions. And so our first candidate that we are interviewing Friday morning is a bilingual candidate. But we prioritized bilingual, special ed, math teachers, science teachers, the teachers, like some CTE teachers or languages other than English teachers, the hard to fill positions. But we also have quite a few teachers that are just like EC through 6 or 4th through 8. With a specialty content area and that kind of thing. And so we're just going to interview them all. And we're excited to get to know them and hope to work with some of them. So, but we do hope that this helps us in our staffing.
So are the teacher residents, can you explain exactly a little bit more what that is so I understand?
Sure, yeah. So instead of coming and doing a 1 semester student teaching time in our classrooms, they will stay an entire year. So the ones that start in January will be December graduates. And so they'll start at mid-year and they'll see that whole process and they'll get to see the end of the year and they'll follow our CSISD calendar. Then they'll get to see the teacher in the year and then start up the year in the fall, and then they'll graduate in December. The ones that start in the fall will get to see, they'll start the day our teachers start and participate in all of our professional learning and everything. And then they'll go the entire cycle of the year and up until the last day of school. And the first semester, they are in the classrooms 3-4 days a week, depending on their classes at A&M, but a minimum of 3. And then the second semester, it's full on our calendar. And they're expected to participate in all faculty meetings, all festivals, all, literacy nights, anything the school has, they will experience it. So we want to put them with, really strong teachers and have a great experience for them so that they know how good our district is and want to stay. So.
That was going to be my question was, do they have any commitment to CSISD once they finish the program?
They don't, and we don't have a commitment to hire them, but we certainly want to hire them if, they are a match for our district and would hope that they would want to stay. Part of this grant is indoctrinating them into our community. So matching them with a mentor. I'm going to tap into some people I know just have met in town for that. And, just to say, this is going on in town, and just really making them feel welcome and a part of our community so that they want to stay in College Station. So. The next decision we received $400,000 for, and this is a tutoring initiative. We elected not to go with an outside tutoring source. We are going to use Amplify, the Decision 2 resource. For this and other resources, we could use the Learning Dynamics resource as well, or we could use other resources. This particular money would help us to pay any A&M. We have an applicant pool of elementary and secondary tutors, and these funds will help us train them and pay them to work with our kids. If they use the Amplify resource, they will go through some specialized training so that we can ensure the training is quality tutoring for our kids. We know that we have quality tutors, but if they use that program. So, so these funds would be used for that. We also have ESSER funds, but we could use these and then use ESSER funds for other things, other needs in the district as well. And then the last decision that we were awarded was Decision 9A. And Tiffany is going to work on this decision with Dr. Heath and Kevin Ross, and it is to plan for PTech, which is Pathways Technology Early College High School. And PTech programs are just pathways to makes connections between college, school, and industry partners, and it prepares kids with like a certification or something that prepares them for the workforce. And as you can see, these $400,000 would be used to help plan, fund, help with personnel recruitment, any equipment or materials that would be needed, professional development for the staff, funding assistance of ancillary kinds of things. So watch for this in the transmittal, and Tiffany, I'm sure, will be giving further board reports as this item develops with more detail for you all, in addition to what she has put in the transmittal and will continue to add to the transmittal. So we're very excited about this possibility. I believe, as she indicated, they could be a PTech campus in the 23-24 school year, if this plays out like we hope it will.
And this would be with College View High School?
And this would be College View High School. Yes, sir. So with that, That is our PTEC grant. We're so excited. So we received over $7 million to really help our district. And so it's a celebration for our kids and just for our district in general. So any questions or comments?
Comment and question. Comment, first of all, yes, it is exciting. Thank you. I mean, that's a lot of money and a lot of work getting it, but it's also going to be a lot to use it too. It looks like a lot of really neat programs, it seems like, the particular two that stand out to me is the grow your own with the paras. I mean, what a wonderful way to, develop people that are here working in our district to be able to become, teachers and certified
Right.
teachers. I think that's fabulous. And same with the residency, as we just discussed. What a wonderful way to, again, help us get more staff and help us develop that staff, be a part of developing them. I guess one piece I want to kind of understand on the question side of it, some of it you mentioned the timing on some of these, but what's like the timing overall on this money, particularly when you said the 6 coaches positions?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of how is that funding going to last?
We have coaches at the elementary level, and so we can actually code those coaches to help with Amplify with the number of teachers that we have at the elementary level on the grade spans that we are actually going to serve with these materials. We qualified for 6. So we could actually code those units during this time of the grant, which will go through the 23-24 school year with these funds.
Okay, so not necessarily new coaches, just being able to use some of this money for them and free up.
Right, just to help our budget.
What it does is allows you to code those positions to these particular funds during the duration of the grant.
Right. So the state has, as you all know, just from Amy giving budget reports, that we have been cut in significant ways in different parts of our budget. IMA alone was cut 65%. So we're having to be as diligent as possible to with our funds. So.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
All right, thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right, well, that is going to be it for our workshop. We will adjourn and be back in about 40 minutes.